My name is Hamu, and my life changed forever the night my husband, Munhamo, died. Munhamo was the kind of man every woman wanted. He was strong, kind, and loving. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but it was full of love and respect. We lived in a small village where everyone knew each other, and everyone knew Munhamo. He was a protector, a provider, and a friend to many. So when he suddenly collapsed in front of me, I could hardly believe it. It started just after sunset. We were sitting at the dinner table, enjoying a quiet evening. I was serving him his favorite meal, roast chicken, fried vegetables, and a soft porridge made of maize meal. We had talked about his plans for the next harvest, his ideas for building a new shed for the goats, and what we would do to celebrate the coming festival. The future had seemed so bright, but then, without warning, he suddenly gripped his chest, his face contorting with pain. "Munhamo," I cried, "what is happening?" And I rushed to his side. He couldn't speak, his body trembled, and his eyes seemed to glaze over. The room felt as if it was closing in on me, the walls pressing in, trapping us in that horrible moment. I screamed for help, but by the time the villagers had arrived, it was too late. Munhamo was gone. The news spread through the village like wildfire. Everyone was shocked. People came to my house to offer their condolences, but all I could do was sit there, in a daze, staring at my husband's lifeless body. The healer, the village elder, and even the priest came in to see him, but no one could explain what had happened. As the funeral preparations began, strange things began happening. It seemed as if the air around me had changed. I felt a coldness that I couldn't shake, even though the weather was warm. That night, as I sat alone, staring at Munhamo's favorite chair, I saw something. It was very brief, a shadow in the corner of my eye. I saw a silhouette that looked exactly like Munhamo, standing in the doorway. I froze, my heart racing. I blinked and it was gone. I told myself it was just my imagination, that my grief had made me see things that weren't there. But deep down, I knew that something wasn't right. There was no logical explanation for what I had seen. Next morning, I dismissed the thought, focusing instead on the funeral arrangements. The village elders came to make preparations according to my custom. The air was heavy with sorrow, but something else, something darker, lingered in the background. It wasn't long after Munhamo was buried that I first felt his presence again. I had fallen into a deep, troubled sleep, my mind full of chaotic thoughts about my lost husband. The night was quiet, save for the sounds of distant crickets and the wind rustling through the trees. I woke up in the middle of the night to a strange warmth beside me. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but when I opened my eyes, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There he was. Munhamo was lying beside me. His face was just as I remembered it. He was smiling softly at me, his eyes full of love. "Hamu," he whispered, "don't be afraid. I am here to protect you." I gasped and sat up in bed, but when I looked around, he was gone. My heart raced, and I felt dizzy, as though I was still caught between a dream and reality. I glanced at the empty side of the bed where he had been, but the sheets were undisturbed. Had I really seen him? I wondered. Or had it been a dream? The room felt strangely quiet, and for the first time since his death, I felt a sense of peace. But then, doubt crept in again. How could he be here? Munhamo was dead. The logical part of me tried to explain it away. Maybe I was just grieving too much. But the next night, it happened again. This time, he appeared more clearly. His body was solid. His touch was warm and comforting. He lay beside me as if nothing had changed, as if we were still the same couple, sharing our bed. Munhamo, I whispered, my voice trembling. How is this possible? He smiled softly and cupped my face. It is possible because my love for you will never die. I will always be with you, even in death. His voice sent a shiver down my spine. I wanted to believe him, but part of me still questioned everything. That night, I felt a strange warmth, a comfort I hadn't known since his death. But when I woke up in the morning, the sheets were a mess, and my body bore the unmistakable evidence that Munhamo had been with me. I couldn't understand it. How was it possible? Munhamo had died. He had been buried, and I saw him get buried. But here I was, with the very real evidence that he had been with me in the most intimate way. I couldn't deny it, and yet I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I was losing my mind or if something supernatural was truly at play. And so began my strange and disturbing journey. I knew that something was different, but what could I do? My husband, the man I had loved, had returned to me, but not in the way I had hoped. He returned to me in a way that defied all logic. It was after several nights of Munhamo's visits that I began to question my own sanity. The dreams, the touch, the warmth, how could they be real? How could he still be with me after he died? The second night, after our intimacy, I woke up with a start, my body trembling as I sat up in bed. The sheets were tangled around me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I glanced at the empty side of the bed. There was nothing unusual about it. There was no sign that Munhamo had been there, no lingering trace of warmth. But when I looked down, I saw it. My body, my skin, my hair was marked. I knew instantly what had happened. The evidence was undeniable. Munhamo had been with me, even though he was dead. How could this be? How could it be that he still had physical presence in this world? My hands trembled as I pulled the blankets around me. I had always believed in the impossible, but this was too much. I needed answers, but how could I ask for them when I knew no one would believe me? How could I explain to anyone that my dead husband was still coming to me in the night and asking for things that a wife would give to her husband? As the days passed, I became more confused. I couldn't speak to anyone about what was happening. I couldn't share the secret I now carried. The villagers would think that I had lost my mind. I felt isolated, trapped in a reality that no one else could understand. But each night, Munhamo would return, and each time I found myself drawn to him, to the man I had once loved. It was as if nothing had changed, as if he was still here, still my husband in every way that mattered. And deep down, a part of me was happy to have him back, even if it was in a form that no one else would comprehend. But even as I found comfort in his visits, a growing sense of fear began to stir within me. What was happening, and why was this happening? And more importantly, what did it mean for the future? I lived in silence for weeks, carrying the secret of Munhamo's visits like a heavy stone in my heart. The days were normal enough. Villagers came to check on me, offering firewood, food, and company. But at night, my life was anything but normal. Munhamo would appear, just as he had in life, his voice soft and familiar. He would hold me, talk to me, and reassure me that he was still my protector. At first, I tried to resist, to tell him that he should rest in peace. But how could I deny the comfort he brought me? He was the same Munhamo I had loved. But of course, there was something different about him. He was supposed to be dead, wasn't he? Sometimes his words carried a weight they hadn't before. "You don't need anyone else, Hamu," he would say, his eyes piercing mine. "I am all you need. No one else will ever love you the way I do." His visits weren't just comforting anymore, they were possessive. At first, I tried to convince myself that it was all in my head, that my grief was making me imagine things. But the evidence, the way I felt, the unmistakable signs each morning proved otherwise. I prayed, asking for God's guidance. I begged him to give Munhamo peace, to allow him to move on. But my prayers seemed to fall on deaf ears, because each night he returned, and each morning I woke up more confused than the last. One morning, as I swept the yard, Sando approached me. He was a kind man and always helpful. He had been one of the few villagers who treated me with kindness after Munhamo's death. I saw him often, bringing firewood or helping with small tasks around the homestead. Hesitantly, he approached me, his eyes avoiding me. "Hamu," he said, "I've been thinking of you. You are still young, and it's not right for you to be alone." I froze. The broom dropped to the ground. I knew where this was going, but I didn't know how to respond. "I mean no disrespect to you," he continued quickly, "but I was wondering if you might consider getting to know me better." But before I could answer, his whole demeanor changed. His eyes widened, and he stepped back as if he'd seen a ghost. "What's wrong?" I asked, my voice trembling. He pointed a shaking finger at the space behind me. "Munhamo," he stammered. "He's standing right there." I spun around, but there was nothing. The yard was empty. "Sando, there's no one here," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But he wasn't convinced. He stumbled away, mumbling under his breath, and left me standing there, confused and afraid. Word spread quickly. By the next day, everyone in the village was talking about Sando's claim that Munhamo was still alive. Some laughed, dismissing it as the rumblings of a man who had been rejected by his love interest. Others wondered if there might be some truth to it. I tried to ignore the rumors, but it was impossible. Everywhere I went, I felt the weight of their stares, heard the hushed conversations that stopped the moment I approached. Two other men, emboldened by Sando's failure, decided to test the rumors for themselves. The first was a farmer named Tavengwa. He came to me one afternoon. "Hamu," he began, his tone casual, "I know you've been through a lot, but I was wondering if you might consider moving on." Before he could finish, his face contorted in fear. "He's here," he shouted, pointing wildly at the air beside me. The second man, a hunter named Gomo, had a similar experience. He didn't even get the chance to finish his proposal before he dropped his spear and fled, yelling Munhamo's name as he disappeared into the forest. By now, the rumors had reached their peak. People whispered that Munhamo's spirit was haunting me, that he refused to leave because of some unfinished business. Some said I had summoned him back using witchcraft, and others believed that he had returned on his own, driven by his love for me. One day, a group of villagers, led by the village elder, came to my house. Their faces were a mixture of fear and curiosity. "Hamu," said the village elder, his voice stern, "we need to talk." I knew exactly what was coming. They wanted answers, answers I didn't have. "Is it true?" he asked. "Is Munhamo's spirit with you?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Munhamo is my husband," I said simply. "He loved me in life, and he still loves me. I don't see why that should bother anyone." "But he's dead," someone shouted. "How could he still be here?" "I don't know," I admitted. "All I know is that he hasn't harmed me. He only wants to protect me and our family." The crowd erupted into murmurs, some agreeing with me, and others calling for me to leave the village. "Enough," the elder said, raising his hand. "We will not make any decisions today. Let us think and consult our ancestors before we act." I nodded, grateful for the reprieve. But as the crowd disappeared, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life was about to change again, and not for the better. After the confrontation with the villagers, I expected Munhamo to be angry. But when he came to me that night, his demeanor was calm, almost serene. He sat opposite me as I sat on the bed, his familiar scent filling the room. "You defended me," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Thank you. You are stronger than I ever imagined." His words warmed me, but they also made me uneasy. "Munhamo," I began cautiously, "why can't you move on? Why are you still here?" He took my hands in his touch as warm as it had been in life. "I cannot leave you," he said simply. "You are my wife, my love. I vow to protect you in life, and I will not break that vow, even in death." "But your presence, it's causing problems," I whispered. "The villagers think I've done something wrong." "Let them think what they want," he replied, his gaze unwavering. "Our bond is unbreakable, Hamu. No one can come between us." I wanted to argue, to tell him that his presence was more a curse than a blessing, but the words stuck in my mouth. Deep down, I was afraid of losing him again, afraid of what his lingering presence meant for me. Sando didn't give up easily. Though he avoided my house after his terrifying experience, he continued to speak to anyone who would listen. "I am telling you, Namo is alive," he insisted. "His death was staged. Hamu is hiding something." At first, the villagers dismissed him as a fool, but as more men came forward with stories of seeing Munhamo's ghost, the whispers grew louder. One day, I overheard two women talking outside my house. "She must have used some kind of magic to bring him back," one said. "Or maybe he can't rest because of her," the other replied. "They say spirits linger when they haven't finished business." Their words cut through me like a knife. I wanted to burst out and defend myself. But what could I say? The truth was stranger than any rumor they could invent. That night, I dreamt of my ancestors. They appeared to me as shadows, their voices echoing in my mind. "Hamu," they said in unison, "your husband's spirit is restless. He clings to this world because of his love for you. But love alone cannot sustain him. If he does not let you go, his presence will bring misfortune to you." I woke up with a start, my heart pounding. The dream felt so real, as if the ancestors had truly spoken to me. I knew I had to confront Munhamo, but the thought of challenging him filled me with dread. When he appeared that night, I hesitated before speaking. "Munhamo," I said carefully, "the ancestors came to me in my dream. They said your presence here is unnatural. They warned me that it could bring harm to us both." He frowned, his expression darkening. "The ancestors are wrong," he said firmly. My love for you is pure. How can something so strong be harmful? But you are not meant to be here, I insisted. You need to rest, to find peace. But I am at peace, he replied, his voice rising. My peace is with you, Hamu. Don't ask me to leave. His words left me shaken. For the first time, I saw the danger in his love, a love so strong it defied death itself. The villagers could not ignore the rumors any longer. The elders called a meeting to discuss my situation, and though I wasn't invited, I heard about it from a neighbor. They want you to leave the village, she whispered. They think your husband's spirit is cursed, and they don't want it bringing bad luck to the rest of us. The news didn't surprise me, but it hurt all the same. This village had been my home for years, and now I was being treated like an outcast. That night, I told Munhamo about the meeting. They want me to leave, I said, my voice trembling. They think you are a curse. They will not drive you away, he said fiercely. I will not allow it. His words were meant to comfort me, but they only deepened my fear. I wondered just how far Munhamo would go to keep me by his side. Gomo the hunter felt ill shortly after his encounter with Munhamo's ghost. The villagers whispered that it was a curse, that Munhamo's spirit had punished him for trying to take me away. The elders visited Gomo's house, performing rituals and offering sacrifices to appease the spirit. But Gomo's condition worsened, and soon he could no longer speak. When word of his illness reached me, I felt a wave of guilt and fear. Was Munhamo truly capable of harming the living? Or was this just a coincidence? Another cruel twist of fate. That night, Munhamo appeared angrier than I'd ever seen him. How dare they blame me for that man's illness, he growled, his voice echoing in the small room. I did nothing to him. They are turning you against me. I don't know what to believe, I admitted, tears streaming down my face. All I know is that this isn't right. You shouldn't be here, Munhamo. His expression softened, and I reached out to touch his face. I love you, Hamu. Can't you see? Everything I do is for you. But his love, once a source of comfort, now felt like a chain binding me to a world I didn't understand. Gomo's illness sent ripples of fear through the village. Some believed that Munhamo's spirit was exacting vengeance on anyone who tried to come near me. Others thought I had cursed him through some dark ritual. I couldn't escape the stares, nor the whispers that followed me everywhere I went. Even children ran away from me, their mothers pulling them close and muttering prayers under their breath. But the worst part was my own doubt. I began questioning everything. Munhamo's love, his intentions, and even my own sanity. Was this really the man I had married? Or had his spirit been twisted by the world of the dead? One night, as Munhamo appeared in our room, I couldn't hold back anymore. Why do you cling to me? You said you were here to protect me, but all you've done is bring fear and chaos into my life. I whispered, my voice trembling. His expression darkened. Fear and chaos? Is that what you think of me, Hamu? Everything I've done out of love for you. How can you accuse me of such things? I don't know what to think anymore, I cried, my voice breaking. I just want peace, Munhamo. Peace for you and peace for me. Please go. For the first time, his form seemed to flicker, as though my words had shaken him. But he quickly steadied himself, his gaze hardening. I will not leave you, he said. Not now, not ever. Meanwhile, the village elders decided they could no longer wait. They came to my house one afternoon, led by the oldest and most respected among them. Hamu, the elder said, his tone grave, the village has suffered enough. We cannot allow this spirit to remain among us. You must leave, or we will be forced to take matters into our own hands. My heart sank. Where would I go? I asked, tears filling my eyes. This is my home. It was your home, he replied, but your husband's presence has turned it into something else. For the good of the village, you must go. That night, I told Munhamo what had happened. He listened in silence, his expression unreadable. They want to drive me away, I said, my voice breaking. They think you're dangerous. They have no right to take you away from me, he said, his voice low and dangerous. If they try, they will regret it. Munhamo's words sent a chill down my spine. For the first time, I realized just how far he would go to keep me by his side. As the village prepared to confront me, I prepared for the battle ahead. The battle was not just against the villagers, it was also against the man I had loved and lost, but refused to let me go, even in his death.